Welcome to Vocabify English.
Easy English and real-life conversation.
Hey English learners, welcome back to Vocabify English channel, your cozy place for easy English and real-life conversation. Have you ever walked into a coffee shop and, perfectly rehearsed your English order in your head for like 10 minutes?
Oh, yeah, we've all been there.
Right. But then the second the barista actually makes eye contact with you, your mind just goes completely blank.
It just completely empties out.
It does. So today, we're doing a deep dive into a video from Mr. English channel, and we are decoding the psychology behind that exact freeze.
Yeah, we're basically breaking down these social and psychological hacks for starting conversations.
Because our mission today is to help you conquer that very real, honestly deeply relatable fear of actually speaking English in the real world.
It is such a universal experience, you can spend hundreds of hours memorizing these huge vocabulary lists and, well, perfecting your pronunciation.
Right, mastering all the complex grammar rules.
Exactly. But all that theoretical knowledge, it doesn't just automatically translate into the physical, spontaneous act of talking to a real human being.
Yeah, it's like there's this massive psychological gap, right, between knowing a language on paper and actually deploying it out in the wild.
Oh, absolutely.
So let's unpack that freeze.
Yeah.
Because it's not just a slight hesitation. It feels like a full physiological response. You lock up.
You really do.
I think for a lot of people, speaking English to a native speaker feels like, well, it's like every person you meet is walking around with a giant red pen.
A red pen, yes.
Like they're just waiting to grade your sentences and mark giant red X's all over your casual conversation.
And that mental image of the red pen, that is exactly the trap we fall into. When you approach a conversation like it's a test, your brain literally treats the other person as an examiner.
Which obviously triggers a massive stress response.
Right. But if we look at the psychology of human interaction, that whole narrative is completely backward. People are not grading your grammar.
No, they're really not.
They are looking for human connection. We learn languages fundamentally to connect with people. And when you realize that the person across from you is just looking for a meaningful exchange, it shifts the focus entirely.
Okay, so instead of them thinking, did I use the present perfect continuous tense correctly?
Right. They aren't thinking that at all.
They're basically just subconsciously thinking, what is this person trying to tell me?
Precisely. They're focused on meaning. Think about the mechanics of just everyday socializing.
Yeah.
The person you are talking to is usually just happy you're making the effort to interact with them. They aren't scanning for errors, they're scanning for intent and friendliness.
Okay, well, if we can accept that people generally just want connection and aren't, secretly judging our verb conjugations.
Which they aren't.
Right. How do we actually initiate it? Because when you're caught in that initial moment of panic, you're entirely self-focused.
You are.
You're trapped inside your own head, worrying about your own performance.
And that self-focus is really the core hurdle. Because the fear is entirely inward, the safest way to break the ice is to force your attention outward.
Focus on something completely external.
Exactly. Something external and shared. The most basic application of this from the source material is acknowledging your shared environment.
Okay.
You just ask yourself, what is happening around both of you in that exact physical moment?
You mean the weather? Or, I don't know, waiting in line at a bakery and pointing at a pastry?
Yes, exactly that.
I have to push back a little here, though.
Okay, go for it.
Isn't talking about the weather a massively boring cliche? It feels like the ultimate stereotype of a superficial conversation.
It is a total cliche.
Right. If I walk up to someone at a bus stop and say, wow, it sure is cold today, I feel like I'm not really saying anything of substance.
Oh, it absolutely is a cliche, but we have to analyze why it became a cliche in the first place,
Okay, why?
It works brilliantly on a psychological level because it's a universal, indisputable, shared experience. By presenting a super low-stakes observation...
Like I didn't bring my umbrella.
Right, or the wind is brutal today. When you do that, you are offering an incredibly easy entry point. It requires almost zero cognitive effort for the other person to agree and jump into the chat.
So it's not supposed to be this deep philosophical debate?
Not at all. It's just a social lubricant. They can just say, yeah, I'm freezing too, and suddenly, boom, the ice is broken.
Ah, okay.
You aren't asking them to reveal deep personal truths. You're just acknowledging a shared reality. It creates a little microbond.
I see. So the cliche is actually a feature, not a bug.
Exactly.
It's safe. It's like a physical warm-up stretch before you start running. And I guess the coffee shop example works the exact same way, right?
It does.
If you ask, that cake looks amazing, have you tried it before?
Yeah.
You're really just inviting them to share a tiny, harmless opinion.
Right. And people naturally enjoy giving their opinions on low-stakes topics. It makes them feel slightly authoritative, but in a really helpful way.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It establishes a quick, natural rapport without putting any pressure on either of you.
But let's say the environment is just a total dead end. Like maybe you're indoors, the weather is completely average, and there is no cake in sight.
A tragic scenario, but yes.
Tragic, truly.
Yeah.
If we want to escalate the interaction just a tiny bit, taking a step from the purely external environment into slightly more personal territory, the source brings up flattery,
Yes.
giving a compliment.
And everyone appreciates being noticed, right?
Yeah.
But stepping into personal territory requires some finesse. There's a very clear boundary here.
Oh, definitely.
You have to keep it to safe, external choices that the person made. Complimenting someone's clothes, their bag, their shoes, or maybe a classmate's energy during a meeting.
Because those are safe.
Right, they validate a person's taste or effort. You have to actively avoid overly personal physical comments.
Right, like telling a stranger, you have beautiful ears.
Oh my gosh, yes. That is incredibly invasive.
It's so weird. Staring at a stranger's ears and complimenting them is a fantastic way to make someone physically back away from you.
Please stick to the jacket or the sneakers.
Seriously. But even with a safe compliment, I see a mechanical flaw here.
What's that?
Well, if I walk up to someone and just say, hey, nice jacket,
Yeah.
doesn't the person usually just smile, say thanks, and then...
And then you're right back in that awkward silence.
Exactly. You're right back where you started.
That is the trap of the dead-end compliment. To make it conversational, you have to use a very specific formula that the video mentions, the compliment plus the question.
The compliment plus the question.
Okay. You cannot just drop flattery and walk away. You have to build a conversational bridge by immediately asking a follow-up.
Like what?
Like, nice jacket, where'd you get it? Or, I love those sneakers, are they actually comfortable for walking?
Ah, okay, that makes so much sense. The compliment disarms them and gets their positive attention, but the question actually forces the gears of the conversation to turn.
Precisely. A compliment alone is a closed loop. But if you ask where they got the jacket, they have to give you a real answer.
Right.
They might say, oh, at the mall down the street, or it was a gift from my brother, and whatever they say, they have just handed you new information.
Right, so now you have material to base your next question on.
Exactly, which keeps the momentum alive.
Okay, so compliments tap into the human desire to feel good and validated. But there's another level to this in the deep dive that taps into a completely different psychological drive, and that is asking for a small favor or just simple help.
This is where the psychology gets really fascinating, honestly. While compliments make people feel good about their choices, asking for help makes people feel useful.
Useful, yeah.
And feeling useful is a deeply ingrained human need. It touches on something known as the Ben Franklin effect.
Oh, I've heard of this.
Yeah, when we do a small favor for someone, our brain rationalizes that we must like that person. We evolved as a cooperative species, so we genuinely enjoy solving small problems for our fellow humans.
But wait, I have to challenge this in a modern context.
Okay.
One of the classic examples of asking for help is asking for directions to the train station.
Sure.
If I'm walking down the street and I stop a stranger to ask for directions, aren't they just going to look at me and think, why are you bothering me? You literally have a smartphone in your pocket with a map.
I hear that a lot.
I'd be terrified of just annoying them.
It's a valid anxiety, but you are overestimating how much people rely strictly on cold logic in social situations and underestimating their inherent desire to be helpful.
Really?
Yes. You have a phone, sure. But when you put the phone away and say, excuse me, do you know where the train station is? You are offering them a momentary role as a local expert.
So the feeling of being the helpful local kind of overrides the potential annoyance.
In most cases, yes. And structurally, it's an incredibly safe method for you, the language learner. Let's analyze the possible outcomes here.
Okay.
If the person is busy, in a rush, or genuinely doesn't know, they just say, sorry, I'm not from around here, or I'm in a hurry.
And then what?
You just say, no problem, thanks anyway, and it's over. There is zero awkwardness because the rejection is about their lack of knowledge or time.
Right, not about you or your English.
Exactly. That's a huge relief, actually. A rejection in that scenario isn't a rejection of you.
I love that.
And if they do know the way, they get to experience that rush of feeling useful. They might point you in the right direction, or they might even walk with you for a block to show you the way.
Oh, wow.
And suddenly, without forcing it, you've created an organic environment to practice your English.
Okay, so we have this clear progression of tools, acknowledging the shared environment, utilizing the complement plus question, and asking for small help. But we really need to talk about execution.
Execution is everything.
Because having the perfect sentence memorized is completely useless if your physical delivery screams, I am absolutely terrified of you.
The execution phase is where mindset and body language take over. If you're panicked, your shoulders are tense, your breathing is shallow.
Yeah, and the interaction will naturally feel strained.
Exactly. The fundamental mindset shift required here is moving your brain away from fear and shifting it toward genuine curiosity about the other person.
Which totally makes sense, because fear is entirely self-centered. When I'm afraid, my internal monologue is just, how do I sound? Is my accent weird? Did I mess up that vowel?
Right, it's all about you.
But curiosity forces the spotlight onto them. Who is this person? What's their day like? When you focus outward, that internal panic has to quiet down because your brain can really only process so much at once.
Exactly. And that internal shift directly impacts your physical presence. Body language is a universal language, and it speaks volumes before you utter a single English word. If you approach someone with genuine curiosity, your posture naturally opens up. You need a warm, genuine smile. You want to subtly signal, I am safe and I am friendly.
Right. You can't march up to someone with your fists clenched and a scowling face of concentration and expect a friendly chat.
Please don't do that.
And eye contact is huge here, too. The feeling of embarrassment or nervousness often makes you want to look down at your shoes.
Yes.
But staring at the floor communicates deep insecurity. And honestly, it makes the other person uncomfortable because they don't know what you're looking at.
You have to look at them and invite them into the interaction. And once you invite them in, you have to actually participate. Which brings us to the art of listening.
Okay.
Think of a good conversation like a game of catch. You throw the ball by asking a question, but then you have to actually put your glove up and catch their response.
Okay, I have a confession. I am so guilty of dropping the ball here. Yes. When I'm trying to speak a different language, I fall into this terrible trap. I ask a question, and while the other person is giving me this great detailed answer, I am not listening to a single word they are saying.
You're just thinking about what to say next.
Completely. I am entirely in my own head, frantically translating and constructing my next sentence so I don't look foolish when it's my turn to speak again.
Well, what you're describing is classic cognitive overload. Think of your brain like a computer. Your working memory, your RAM, is entirely consumed by translating grammar rules in real time and managing your anxiety.
Yes.
It leaves absolutely zero processing power for actually listening. But if you can let go of managing your own performance and truly listen, the other person will literally hand you the next topic.
Yes. If I ask someone how their weekend was and they mention taking their dog to the park, I don't need a brilliant, pre-planned follow-up question.
No, the topic is right there.
I just catch the ball and ask, oh, what kind of dog do you have? You just follow their lead instead of trying to steer the whole ship yourself.
Precisely. You don't have to architect the entire trajectory of the conversation. You just have to be present and react to what they are giving you.
But, okay, let's be realistic here. We can have an open posture.
Yeah.
We can be genuinely curious. We can listen closely. And things are still going to go wrong sometimes.
Of course they are.
We need to talk about troubleshooting. Because the fear of these worst-case scenarios is what stops people from trying at all.
Definitely.
So, scenario A, the blank stare. You muster up the courage, you deliver your English sentence, and the stranger just looks at you with total confusion. I mean, you can literally feel the heat rising in your neck.
That physical sensation of embarrassment is so intense, and in the moment, it feels catastrophic.
It really does.
But we have to look at the reality of the situation. A confused face rarely means your English grammar is terrible.
No.
More often than not, it is a mechanical issue. There was background noise, a passing truck, or because you were nervous, you spoke much too quietly and they simply didn't hear you.
So running away in shame is the wrong move.
Definitely the wrong move.
The fix is to just take a breath, smile, and just repeat yourself a little slower and a little louder.
Exactly.
And if they still look lost, the video has this ultimate tension breaker. You just honestly say, sorry, I am still learning English.
And that simple phrase is incredibly powerful because it employs vulnerability as a connector. It instantly changes the dynamic.
How so?
Well, it turns a stranger who might be feeling awkward because they can't hear you into a patient helper. When you admit you are learning, human empathy just kicks in. It disarms any ego in the interaction, and people naturally want to accommodate you.
Okay, what about scenario B? When your brain just deletes a word. This happens to me constantly. You're mid-sentence, the flow is great, and suddenly your brain's computer just crashes. The word for, say, umbrella, completely vanishes from your working memory. It's like your vocabulary gets abducted by aliens right when you need it.
Right. And the silence during those memory lapses feels like it lasts for hours to you, even though it's barely a second to the listener.
It feels like an eternity.
The psychological workaround here is a linguistic strategy called circumlocution. You don't panic, you just describe the function or appearance of the thing you forgot.
So instead of standing there freezing, you just say, the little roof on a stick you use in the rain.
Exactly. And far from looking foolish, that is actually a sign of advanced language agility.
Wait, really?
Yes. If you can navigate around a missing word by using other vocabulary, you are successfully communicating. Usually, the other person will just smile, politely supply the word umbrella for you, and the conversation moves right along.
Okay, but what about scenario C? The ultimate conversational death. The dreaded crickets.
They're crickets.
You ask an open question,
Yeah.
they give a one-word answer, and the conversation just stops. You're just standing there looking at each other.
We have to normalize this. Not every interaction is destined to blossom into a deep, lingering chat.
Right.
And that is perfectly okay. The key is to let it die gracefully without internalizing it as a personal failure.
Right. You just say, well, have a nice day, and you walk away.
Yeah.
You can't take it personally. That person might be stressing about a work email, or they have a headache, or they're just an introverted person who doesn't feel like chatting. It almost certainly has nothing to do with your language skills.
That is the most important perspective shift a learner can make. Mistakes, awkward silences, forgotten vocabulary, none of these are failures.
No.
They are the actual mechanics of learning. They are the necessary stepping stones on the path to fluency.
Yeah, the actual outcome of any specific conversation doesn't matter nearly as much as the action of trying.
Absolutely.
Every single time you open your mouth to speak to a stranger in English, regardless of how smooth it goes, you are building a habit of courage.
I love that.
It's exactly like building a muscle at the gym. The resistance is what makes you stronger.
And for everyone listening right now, remember that learning English is not an academic exercise. It isn't about passing a grammar test.
Not at all.
It is about expanding your world and crossing a bridge to connect with other human beings. You already have enough English right now to make a friend, to ask for directions, or to share a quick laugh at a bus stop. You should take real pride in the English you already possess today.
I completely agree. Which brings us to the challenge for this week. Sometime in the next few days, we want you to try saying hello to someone new.
Yes, take that small risk.
Acknowledge the weather, give a safe compliment on a cool pair of shoes, or ask for simple directions, even if you already know the way. You will be genuinely surprised by how receptive and kind people can be when you reach out.
And as you prepare to take that challenge, I want to leave you with one final thought to ponder. Think about how you personally react when a tourist or a non-native speaker tries to speak your native language to you.
Oh, that's a great point.
You probably feel a sense of warmth, empathy, and a strong desire to encourage them, right? You certainly aren't silently grading their verb conjugations in your head.
Definitely not.
So if that is the grace, patience, and kindness you naturally offer to others, why wouldn't you assume they are eager to offer that exact same grace to you when you